In today's video, I want to discuss the new contract extension that the Vegas Golden Knights have given Nate Schmidt. They've extended him for 6 years. Plus, I want to take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights salary cap situation over the next couple of years. Could they be putting themselves in a situation to face a major salary cap crunch? We'll discuss all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top here, the Vegas Golden Knights surprisingly announced last night after their game that they've signed defenseman Nate Schmidt to a 6-year contract extension at $5.95 million per season. That's obviously a lot of money and a long-term commitment to a player who's currently serving a 20-game suspension. In case you don't recall, Nate Schmidt was suspended 20 games leading up to the beginning here of the NHL 18-19 season for testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Now that was a scenario that we discussed here before on the channel, and there's a lot of things that went into that not everybody necessarily agreed with, but either way, he's currently serving that suspension. Is almost halfway through. While serving that suspension, he's been over in Austria practicing over with the club over there, kind of staying in game shape, ready to come back here when it's time. And in the process here, has been negotiating a contract extension with the Golden Knights. This kind of flew under the radar here a little bit. I didn't really hear any rumblings leading up to the announcement that this contract extension was coming. But either way, they got a long-term deal here done for arguably their top defenseman. Now, I think most of us can agree here that Nate Schmidt had an awesome year last year for Vegas and was arguably their top defenseman during the regular season and their long playoff run to the Stanley Cup Finals. I think we could also agree here that Nate Schmidt is a very likable guy. He's certainly done a great job, not only on the ice for Vegas, but has been great in their community as well. I've heard all kinds of positive experiences with fan interactions in the community. They all seem to love him there in Vegas, which is great, and I do think he's a big part of this team. In discussing potential future captains on this channel before, I suggested that I thought Nate Schmidt might make a great captain for Vegas here in the short term here someday. So I do really like this player, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure about the contract value here in this case. The fact that they signed him for 6 years here is not really a major issue. He's still young enough. He's only 27 years old. I don't really have a lot of issue with the term, but $5.95 million does seem like an awful lot of money based on what Nate Schmidt brings. And my other concern here is not only this contract, but this is one of many long-term deals here that the Vegas Golden Knights have announced here just in recent days. It was only a few days ago they announced a long-term contract for Alex Tuch. Obviously, we went into the season with an unsigned Shea Theodore, who then signed late, but still got himself a long-term contract as well. Of course, they picked up Max Pacioretty from the Canadiens right before training camp opened and inked him to a longer-term contract here as well. So they got a lot of money tied up and a lot of newer players, not to mention Paul Stastny they brought in as a free agent here during the offseason as well. It wasn't that long ago leading into the end of last season into free agency that we talked about how much cap space Vegas had and how much flexibility that gave them. Obviously, they made some deals at the deadline last year. They dipped into free agency, and then later into the offseason we saw the Pacioretty trade. Now we see some other long-term extensions here, and suddenly a lot of that flexibility here is gone. I mean, they're down to $5 million cap space right now for the current season, and that doesn't really give them a whole lot here. And leading forward, they have even more players tied up here long term. So let's take a look at their overall cap situation here over the next number of years to see kind of what I'm talking about here in case you're not familiar with a lot of their team's contracts. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to throw up here on the screen are courtesy of capfriendly.com. They are a tremendous resource that I use quite a bit for doing research for a lot of these videos. And if you ever want to find out any details on player contracts or where teams sit with the salary cap and whatnot, it's a great site. I highly recommend you go check them out. So the first image we're going to show here is just the overall snapshot of Vegas's current cap situation for the current season. As you can see, they have over $5 million in contract space. Which, really, depending on what they want to do later in the year, may not give them as much flexibility as they had in the past, but still, they do have some. It's just hard to imagine in year 2 of being an expansion team that they could potentially already be a cap team if they make any more acquisitions leading into the playoffs here. Now, one of my other concerns, too, is the fact that we did expect Vegas to regress this year. I know when I did my prediction videos, I did have them finishing lower in the division. I did say that many of their players, and therefore as a team, likely would take a step back this year. It's just totally normal and natural for that to happen. As much as they accomplished a lot last year, you can make an argument that to a degree they certainly did overachieve. I mean, this team was on a mission last year. They had a lot to prove, and there was just a lot of unique circumstances that went into their success last year that you can't bank on all of it at least continuing and carrying over to the 18-19 season. Not that I expect them to be a bad team by any means. I still like the makeup of this club, but I still think that they are built here to have a fair bit of success. Can they go back to the Stanley Cup Finals and repeat last year's run? That's a big question, and I certainly have concerns that they very well might not be capable of that. Now let's take a look here at their forward group and what they have in salary cap projections here over the next few years. So I'm going to put that up on the screen now. Now, as you can see here, they have a large number of longer-term deals, and they have a fair bit of expiring contracts as well. I mean, obviously, a couple of guys they looked after last year, like Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith, both making $5 million per year. You know, Smith has $5 million for 4 years. You got Marchessault 5 years for another 6 years here. So, obviously, those contracts, in my opinion, aren't too bad. If you take a look at how they've gotten off here the start of the year, Marchessault has 10 points in his first 9 games. Smith has 5 points in his first 9 games. They've been a little bit more consistent here. I don't have any issues with those deals. I think they're very fair. And long-term here, especially for Marchessault, could turn out to be a very much of a bargain contract in another couple of years as, you know, contracts continue to go up and the cap continues to rise. Now, you also take a look at the brand new contract they gave Max Pacioretty. He's making $4 million this year. Then his $7 million 4-year extension kicks in next season. He's not having the greatest start, in my opinion. He's got 2 goals in 9 games. Although I don't know, you could really blame all that on him. I mean, his his center iceman he was supposed to play with, Paul Stastny, has been out injured. But Paul Stastny, got into the first 3 games and put up no points as well. Although it does take time to build chemistry, I do understand that. Just a slower start considering, what they were probably hoping for. Also, take a look at the new extension here for Alex Tuch at $4.75 million. On a 7-year extension. Now, I did talk about that just the other day here, and Alex Tuch is a player that I do have a lot of confidence in. I don't have many issues with the Alex Tuch contract itself. It's just another one here to add on to the pile of long-term deals they've handed out lately. And if a lot of these players do regress and don't perform, it could certainly create a major cap situation for Vegas here in the short term. Now, they also have some UFAs coming up as well, including the big one, William Carlson. Now, this, for me, is the head-scratcher. They gave out long-term deals to all these players, but yet their 40-goal scorer and arguably their top guy last year, William Carlson, could not get a long-term deal. Now, I'm not sure how all the negotiations went. We don't know all the figures they discussed, but obviously they ended up settling here on a 1-year deal of $5.25 million. Now, at this point in time, William Carlson is still performing. He has 8 points in his first 9 games. If that continues and he ends up being a 75 or 80-point player, he is going to, command much bigger money like he was originally looking for this past offseason. So that is going to improve things difficult. And the other thing, too, that I can't help but wonder is if you're William Carlson and you see all these other long-term deals going to guys like Alex Tuch and Shea Theodore and now Nate Schmidt, are you not sitting there wondering, what about me? Could this impact future negotiations for the Vegas Golden Knights and William Carlson? Hard to say. I know his situation is kind of unique as well, and it's a different circumstance being a 40-goal guy for an unestablished player before that. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder how he's feeling seeing all these other guys get long-term deals where he had such a hard time with his negotiations. Now let's take a look here at the defense and take a look at the contracts they have here for their blue line. Obviously, Nate Schmidt right now doesn't show on there because he's under suspension. However, as we just discussed, he's got 5.95 kicking in next season. They also got Shea Theodore, who they just locked up here at the beginning of this year, $5.2 million. Now, the thing I like about that contract for Shea Theodore is that he's a lot younger than Nate Schmidt. He's 4 years younger, 23 years old, and I do think he projects to be a top guy here for a long time. However, you could argue that Shea Theodore certainly has started slow as well, only putting up 1 point in his first 9 games. So I guess in my opinion, as much as I do think Nate Schmidt, you could probably argue was their best defenseman last year, especially through the playoffs, I'm not sure he was that much better than Shea Theodore, that much more important, that he makes that much more than him, over the next 6 years. But either way, they have, Shea Theodore and Nate Schmidt now locked up here long-term for this team. Now, if you take a look at some of their other contracts here in the blue line, you got Colin Miller making $3.875 for 4 years. You've got Braden McNabb at 2.5 for 4 years. You got Nick Holden at 2.2. Now, Nick Holden has not been good so far, in my opinion, here for Vegas. He's, not been very solid defensively at all. But I do like the contracts for McNabb and Miller. Those ones I can live with. They're much more, team-friendly, much more manageable when you're talking about, number 3, 4, 5, 6 defensemen here on the depth chart. The graphic on the screen, you also see the goaltending stats as well for the contracts. Obviously, they just extended Marc-Andre Fleury this offseason at 3 extra years at $7 million per year. Now, normally, again, of course, I don't really have an issue with the Fleury contract. He's certainly been amazing for them. Yes, his play is a little slower this year than most. But again, Marc-Andre Fleury has a way more proven track record than anybody else on this team. So if you're going to commit to somebody and give him that contract, he is the guy to give it to. And I have no issues with that goaltending contract for Vegas. So as you can see here, the Vegas Golden Knights have now handed out a lot of long-term deals. At the beginning of this offseason, it appeared as though they were kind of committed to signing a lot of these guys shorter term. We're looking at 1 to 2 year extensions for some, maybe 3 to 4 to 5 years at most for some others here, for some of their kind of mid-level guys. You saw what Jonathan Marchessault got. I really thought Marchessault might get the longest term contract, especially once we knew that William Carlson only ended up with a 1-year deal. But since then, we've got Theodore, then Tuck, and now we've got Nate Schmidt on these super long-term deals, and it's just eating up a lot of their cap space. Like next year, they already have $72.5 million tied up in 14 players. That only leaves them barely $7 million in cap space for next season. Assuming the cap didn't increase, which it likely will and is expected to, but still, when you're relying on cap increases to kind of give you that flexibility, that's really not in a great situation to be, especially when you're in my opinion here, in the kind of situation that they're in with where their team is at. So as always, I want to hear your comments down below. Let me know what you think of this Nate Schmidt contract, and also let me know what do you think of the overall Vegas situation here with their salary cap situation. They have a lot of money now tied up and invested in a small amount of players heading into the next coming seasons here, and that very well could impact their ability to be as competitive as they'd like to be should they want to make additional changes here down the road. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.